a whisper in the halls of thought, a crack in the firmament of belief. This was not celebration, but a sober recognition of a monumental shift. And so, the ultimate question Nietzsche leaves us with is not whether God is dead, but rather, in a world where such foundations are questioned, how will we choose to live? What values will we champion, and what meaning will we create in the ongoing human story? The repercussions, Nietzsche warned, would be vast, deep, and transformative for humanity. An era of unprecedented freedom, perhaps, but also profound disorientation. The death of God meant the erosion of a divinely ordained moral compass. If morality is not from above, from where does it derive its authority? This question pierces the heart of modern existence, echoing still today. The structures of meaning that guided civilizations for centuries felt hollow. A void opened up, threatening to swallow old certainties whole. This was the dawn of what Nietzsche termed nihilism, the abyss. The belief that life is without objective meaning, purpose, or intrinsic value. Certainties once solid as mountains began to tremble, to shift beneath our feet. A chilling prospect, a universe indifferent to human hopes and desires. Nietzsche didn't revel in this. He saw it as a profound crisis, but also, perhaps, a moment of terrifying, exhilarating liberation. If old values are dead, can new ones be created by humanity? This is the challenge he posed, the revaluation of all values. To look into the abyss without flinching, and to build anew. To find meaning not from external decree, but from within life itself. The weight of this task, the freedom of this possibility, is immense. Nietzsche's words were not an end, but a dramatic turning point. He dared to ask, what does it mean to be human without God? The old maps of meaning, meticulously drawn, started to fade into obscurity. How do we navigate a world stripped of its traditional moral signposts? The implications ripple through philosophy, art, culture, and individual lives. His diagnosis of the death of God remains profoundly relevant now. We live in the shadow, or perhaps the light, of this event. The search for meaning, purpose, and value is an ongoing human quest. Nietzsche's words force us to confront the deepest questions of existence. Are we adrift, or are we architects of a new dawn? The philosopher's hammer struck a chord that still resonates with great power. Understanding this phrase is key to understanding our contemporary world. Join us as we delve deeper into Nietzsche's radical, challenging vision. Echoes of pronouncements, monumental and stark, began to reverberate through modern consciousness. Beyond the headline lies a universe of thought vital for our times. Friedrich Nietzsche, the 19th century German philosopher, was a thinker of immense influence and complexity. His work challenged the foundations of Western philosophy, religion, and morality, employing a distinctive, often aphoristic and poetic style. He explored themes of power, truth, nihilism, and the meaning of existence, leaving behind a legacy that continues to provoke debate and inspire critical thought across numerous disciplines. When Nietzsche declared God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him in works like The Gay Science, he wasn't making a simple statement of personal atheism or predicting the literal demise of a deity. Rather, he was delivering a profound cultural diagnosis concerning the erosion of the Christian God's role as the undisputed source of meaning, morality, and absolute truth in Western civilization. This was a historical observation, not a gleeful pronouncement. To understand this, we must consider the context. The Enlightenment had championed reason and empirical science over faith and divine revelation. Thinkers like Kant had already reshaped philosophical discussions about God, morality, and knowledge. Darwin's theories would soon further challenge traditional religious narratives about human origins and purpose. Nietzsche saw these intellectual currents culminating in a world where belief in the transcendent was becoming increasingly untenable for many. So the death of God signified the decline of a belief system that had provided a shared foundation for Western values and meaning for centuries. This divine guarantor underwrote concepts of good and evil, purpose in life, and the very order of the cosmos. Without this foundation, Nietzsche foresaw a potential crisis. If God is the source of all value and God is dead, then all values might seem to lose their ultimate justification. This leads directly to the concept of nihilism. For Nietzsche, nihilism was the logical consequence of the death of God if no new foundation for values was established. It's the state where the highest values devalue themselves. Life might appear meaningless, all moral distinctions arbitrary, and existence itself purposeless. This isn't just sadness, it's a profound existential vacuum, a sense that nothing truly matters. Nietzsche viewed this dawning nihilism not as an endpoint to be embraced, but as a dangerous transitional phase, a guest that needed to be overcome. He recognized the psychological terror it could induce. If there are no absolute truths or divine commands, on what basis can one live a meaningful life? This void could lead to despair, apathy, or a desperate clinging to outdated dogmas. Crucially, Nietzsche's statement was not merely about individual religious belief. He was analyzing a cultural phenomenon, the collective loss of a shared metaphysical framework in the West. Even those who didn't explicitly believe in God had, for centuries, lived in a society whose moral and cultural grammar was deeply informed by Christian values. The death of God meant this grammar was losing its coherence and authority for society as a whole. The death of God was therefore an event with profound implications for the future of humanity. It presented both an immense danger, the abyss of nihilism, and an unprecedented opportunity. If the old, divinely ordained values were gone, humanity faced the staggering task, and freedom, of creating its own values, of defining meaning for itself. This is a central theme in his later philosophy. This is where Nietzsche's call for a revaluation of all values, Umwertung aller Wert, comes into play. It's not about simply inverting old values, e.g., making bad good, but about critically examining their origins and utility, and then courageously positing new values that affirm life, embrace earthly existence, and foster human flourishing in a world without transcendent guarantees. A declaration that shook the very foundations of Western thought echoed loudly. This act of value creation is an arduous one, requiring immense courage and creativity. It is tied to his concept of the Übermensch, or overman, not a master race, but an ideal of a human being who overcomes nihilism, embraces the will to power, understood as self-mastery and creative drive, and creates new values, living a life of profound self-affirmation. So why does God is dead still matter so profoundly today, over a century later? Because the conditions Nietzsche diagnosed have, in many ways, intensified. Secularization has continued in many parts of the world. The decline of traditional authorities and grand narratives leaves many individuals searching for personal meaning and moral guidance in a seemingly indifferent universe. The challenge of nihilism remains potent. In an age of information overload, competing ideologies, and sometimes overwhelming global crises, the temptation towards cynicism or despair, the feeling that nothing ultimately matters or that all values are merely relative, can be strong. Nietzsche's analysis helps us understand the roots of this potential for meaninglessness. The burden of self-creation, which Nietzsche saw as both a consequence and an opportunity of the death of God, is a defining feature of modern individualism. Without preordained roles or universally accepted moral codes, individuals are often tasked with forging their own identities, purposes, and ethical frameworks from scratch. This can be liberating but also immensely stressful. Ethical dilemmas in our complex world, from bioethics to artificial intelligence to environmental crises, often require us to make profound moral choices without recourse to a universally accepted divine authority. Nietzsche's philosophy forces us to ask, on what human-centered foundations can we build a robust and sustainable ethics for the future? The search for personal purpose is a pervasive theme in contemporary culture. In a world where traditional sources of meaning have waned, many feel an acute need to find or create a sense of purpose that gives their lives direction and significance. Nietzsche's work speaks directly to this existential quest, urging an affirmation of life despite the absence of external validation. Modern anxieties about authenticity, alienation, and the meaning crisis often echo the concerns Nietzsche raised. The feeling of being adrift in a world without fixed stars can be unsettling. His philosophy, while challenging, offers a framework for understanding these anxieties not as mere pathologies, but as consequences of a major historical and cultural shift. Nietzsche did not offer easy answers. Instead, he provided a powerful lens through which to view our condition. He encouraged a kind of heroic individualism, not in the sense of selfishness, but in the courage to face the implications of the death of God, to stare into the abyss of potential meaninglessness, and to actively create value. His emphasis on amor fati, the love of one's fate, encourages an acceptance and affirmation of all aspects of life, the joyful and the painful, as essential parts of a whole. This is not passive resignation, but an active embrace of reality, a way to find meaning and strength even in suffering, by willing that one's life be exactly as it is, and as it will be. Therefore, God is dead is not a triumphant cry of atheistic dismissal, nor is it a lament of pure despair. It is, for Nietzsche, a statement of a critical juncture in human history, a profound challenge that calls for an equally profound response: the creation of new meanings and values by a humanity that has come of age. God is dead, he proclaimed, a philosopher with eyes fixed on the horizon. The ongoing relevance of Nietzsche's proclamation lies in its power to make us question our own foundations. Where do our values truly come from? If not from a divine source, then from where? Are they simply inherited, or have we critically examined and consciously chosen them? These are the uncomfortable, yet vital questions his work compels us to ask. The absence of a universal, transcendent meaning does not, for Nietzsche, necessitate a descent into utter chaos or moral relativism where anything goes. Instead, it places an enormous responsibility upon human beings to cultivate virtues like honesty, courage, and creativity, and to build communities based on shared, life-affirming values. Some critics argue that Nietzsche underestimated the human need for transcendence or the societal stability provided by traditional religious frameworks. Others see his philosophy as dangerously individualistic or elitist. These criticisms are part of the ongoing dialogue his work provokes, highlighting the complexities and potential pitfalls of his ideas. However, many find in Nietzsche a profound affirmation of human potential. His call to become what you are is not a call to selfishness, but to self-realization, to discover and cultivate one's highest possibilities in a world where one must ultimately define those possibilities for oneself. This is a continuous, lifelong process. The death of God also compels us to reconsider our relationship with nature and the cosmos. If humanity is not the divinely appointed center of creation, we might cultivate a deeper humility and a more profound connection to the natural world, seeing ourselves as part of a vast, interconnected web of existence rather than its masters. Nietzsche's philosophy challenges passive acceptance of inherited beliefs. It is an active philosophy, demanding engagement and personal response. It asks us to live more consciously, more intensely, and to take responsibility for the meaning we inscribe upon the world and our own lives through our choices and actions. The last man, der letzte Mensch, is a figure Nietzsche presents as a contrast to the Übermensch, a creature of comfort and conformity, devoid of great ambition or passion, content with shallow pleasures and seeking only security. The death of God, if not met with creative affirmation, risks producing such a diminished humanity. Thus, the call to create values is also a call to avoid this fate of the last man, to strive for something greater than mere contentment, to embrace challenges, and to cultivate a spirit capable of profound joy and profound suffering, seeing both as integral to a full life. This involves a willingness to question, to risk, and to grow. Nietzsche's perspectivism, the idea that there are no absolute, universal truths, only interpretations from different perspectives, is often misunderstood as radical relativism. However, he also believed some perspectives are more life-affirming, more conducive to strength and creativity than others. The challenge is to cultivate these more powerful perspectives. So when we hear God is dead, we should understand it not as a final word, but as the opening line of a challenging new chapter in human history. It's a diagnosis that framed much of 20th and 21st century thought, influencing existentialism, postmodernism, and various artistic and cultural movements. Not a simple claim of atheism, but a profound cultural diagnosis. The implications extend to our understanding of power. Nietzsche's will to power is not merely a desire for domination over others, but a fundamental drive within all living things towards growth, self-overcoming, and the expression of one's inherent capacities. Creating values is an expression of this will to power in its most sublimated, creative form. The death of God created a space, a vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does culture. Nietzsche was concerned about what might rush in to fill this void, potentially new idols, political ideologies, or mass movements that could be just as oppressive, if not more so, than the old religious dogmas, if not grounded in life-affirming values. His critique extended to the herd morality, the values of conformity, utility, and comfort that he believed leveled down human potential. He championed an ethics for individuals capable of standing apart, of forging their own path, though this is often seen as one of his more controversial and easily misinterpreted ideas. Ultimately, Nietzsche's philosophy is a call to courage, the courage to live without easy consolations, the courage to create meaning in a meaningless universe, and the courage to affirm life in its entirety, with all its beauty, terror, and ambiguity. This is the profound challenge embedded in God is dead. The loss of a transcendent authority also raises questions about human fallibility and the dangers of hubris. If humans are the sole creators of value, what safeguards exist against creating monstrous or self-destructive values? Nietzsche himself was aware of these risks, emphasizing the need for self-discipline and constant self-overcoming. Understanding Nietzsche requires moving beyond simplistic interpretations. He was not a straightforward nihilist, nor an advocate for brute force. His work is a complex tapestry of critique, psychological insight, and a passionate call for a new kind of human flourishing grounded in earthly existence. The death of God is not an event to be mourned or celebrated as much as it is a condition to be confronted. It is the philosophical landscape of the modern world, a landscape that demands new maps, new tools for navigation, and a new understanding of what it means to chart a course. Consider the arts. Much of modern and contemporary art, literature, and music grapples with the themes of meaning, alienation, and the search for new forms of expression in a world without the old certainties. Nietzsche's diagnosis anticipated, and in some ways, helped to shape these artistic explorations. The psychological impact of this cultural shift is also immense. The rise of psychotherapies, the focus on self-esteem, identity, and personal fulfillment can all be seen, in part, as responses to the anxieties and opportunities arising from a world where individuals bear more responsibility for their own psychological well-being and sense of purpose. Nietzsche's ideas about eternal recurrence, the thought experiment of living one's life over and over again exactly as it has been, serves as an ultimate test of life affirmation. Would you will your life, with all its joys and sorrows, to repeat infinitely? Only a life lived with profound purpose and acceptance could embrace such a fate. The central pillar supporting an entire worldview was perceived to be crumbling. This concept isn't necessarily a metaphysical claim about reincarnation, but a psychological tool to evaluate one's life and to strive to live in such a way that one could affirm every moment. It's a radical call to embrace the present and to create a life worthy of eternal repetition. The phrase "God is dead" is often taken out of context, brandished as a symbol of aggressive atheism. But for Nietzsche, it was a starting point for a much larger philosophical project: how to live meaningfully, creatively, and joyfully in a world that no longer offers prepackaged answers from a divine authority. He saw the potential for a new kind of innocence in humanity, once it moved beyond guilt-ridden moralities and embraced its own creative power. This isn't a return to a primitive state, but a mature innocence born of self-awareness and the affirmation of life's inherent flux and value. This is not to say his path is easy. Nietzschean ethics demand constant vigilance, self-critique, and a willingness to endure the pathos of distance, the potential isolation that comes from thinking differently and forging one's own values, apart from the crowd. The contemporary search for authenticity can be seen as a diluted echo of Nietzsche's call to become what you are. However, for Nietzsche, this wasn't about simply expressing one's pre-existing inner self, but about actively shaping and overcoming oneself to achieve a higher state of being. So, the death of God, in Nietzsche's view, was not just a loss, but a liberation from old constraints, an opening for humanity to take responsibility for its own destiny. It's a call to move beyond being merely creatures to becoming creators. This perspective challenges us to find the sacred not in an external deity, but within earthly life itself, in human creativity, in moments of profound connection, in the pursuit of excellence, and in the courage to face existence honestly and affirm it fully. The echoes of "God is dead" are found in our struggles with moral relativism, our search for purpose in secular societies, and our attempts to build ethical systems based on reason and human experience rather than divine command. Nietzsche laid bare the magnitude of this task. His work remains a potent antidote to complacency. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our societies, and to ask whether the values we live by are truly our own, or merely inherited habits we haven't dared to question. The task of creating meaning in a post-death of God world is ongoing. It is not a project completed by one philosopher, but a continuous human endeavor, undertaken by each generation and each individual who chooses to engage with these fundamental questions of existence. What happens when the ultimate source of value seemingly vanishes from sight? Ultimately, Nietzsche's "God is dead" is less a conclusion and more an invitation to think critically, to live courageously, and to participate actively in the creation of a future where human beings can flourish by affirming life in all its complexity, without relying on external crutches. So, what did Nietzsche really mean? He meant that a foundational pillar of Western meaning-making had crumbled. He meant that humanity was entering a new, uncharted territory, fraught with the danger of nihilism, but also pregnant with the possibility of self-creation and a new affirmation of life. Why does it still matter? It matters because we are still navigating that territory. The questions he raised about value, purpose, and the human response to a universe without inherent meaning are more pressing than ever in our rapidly changing, often bewildering world. The death of God was not an obituary for belief itself, but for a specific kind of belief that had structured an entire civilization's worldview. It highlighted the human capacity and, for Nietzsche, the necessity to create meaning rather than merely receive it. This challenges us to consider, if the ultimate guarantor of meaning is absent, does that render life meaningless? Or does it empower us to become the artists of our own lives, painting our purposes onto the canvas of existence with the colors of our choices, passions, and affirmations? Nietzsche's message, stripped of its often sensationalized interpretations, is a profound call to existential responsibility. It asks us not what we are owed by the universe, but what we can bring to it. Not what meanings are given, but what meanings we can forge. The death of God thus opens a space for what Nietzsche hoped would be a higher type of human, one who could embrace uncertainty, create values, affirm life in its totality, and dance even at the edge of abysses. Key takeaways: God is dead is a cultural diagnosis of waning traditional authority, not just atheism. It leads to the crisis of nihilism, but also the opportunity for the revaluation of values, creating new, life-affirming meanings. This challenge remains central to modern identity and purpose. Reflecting on Nietzsche's proclamation, we are confronted with its enduring power. It's a mirror showing us not just a historical shift, but our own ongoing struggle and potential. To find our footing, to define our values, and to live authentically in a world that offers no easy answers, only the imperative to create them. The questions Nietzsche unleashed continue to resonate because they are, at their heart, deeply human questions. How shall we live? What is of value? And who shall we become now that the old signposts have faded and the horizon is open, vast, and waiting for our imprint?